Clashes have broken out during an anti-austerity measure rally in Greece's second-largest city, with riot police firing tear gas to disperse protesters. A record number of police are on standby as authorities prepare for the largest protest the country's witnessed against the cuts. Thousands of people are gathering, indeed, in the northern city of Thessaloniki for rallies, as Prime Minister George Papandreou is expected to deliver his annual speech about the state of the economy. Let's talk now to economic analyst Nick Skrekas. He's in Athens for us. Nick, thanks for taking the time out to be on RT International. With thousands of people taking to the streets once again tonight, it seems frustration in Greece has again reached boiling point. You're in Athens. How bad is the situation there? Can you paint the picture for us?
Well, Kevin, it's actually a lot calmer and far more reasonable in Athens than Thessaloniki. But it's usually the case that this time of year, because the focus is very much on the politics and the announcements in Thessaloniki, then just about every group with a grudge, even pre-crisis, would be there and out in force. Now, given this crisis and all of the austerity measures and much of the pain that the average person is feeling in Greece, there is more than enough disenchantment to have more people on the street this year. I gather that most of the protests are fairly peaceful, but there are always a few elements that will create more problems than others.
Nick, there have been some media reports that Greece is likely to declare default even as soon as this weekend. Do you think that could happen?
Kevin, for the last 15 months, I can recall on every third or fourth Friday afternoon, very similar things being said. In this particular case, it would be very hilarious, but for the fact that it was picked up by a lot of mainstream media. Now, I and many other people in Athens involved with investment or law were getting very panicked phone calls yesterday. The possibility of something like this happening over the weekend is absolutely zero. Greece isn't ready to leave the euro, and the Eurozone would not be able to throw us out at such a whim. There is actually no legal exit mechanism in the treaties from the Eurozone. They could force you out practically by cutting off liquidity, but it would not be something that would suit anybody to be done in such a chaotic and offhand manner.
Nick, you do sound very calm and collected tonight. It's good to hear it, and quite positive as well. I mean, nonetheless, though, being serious now, the situation in your country is grim. The situation hasn't improved despite all the cash that's been thrown at it. I mean, a lot of people are saying now it is time to just get out of the Eurozone, go it alone. It can't get worse, can it?
Kevin, it can actually get very much worse. Now, I would agree with many that have criticised the fact that we are in the euro. It really hasn't benefited us all that much. And if one looks at the numbers, I mean, the euro has appreciated about 50% since we actually joined, which has done nothing for our competitiveness. But think about this. If you don't plan very well for such an exit from a currency union, you risk capital flight, you risk a crushing devaluation, which could lead to hyperinflation. I think it's a discussion and debate that we need to have in Greece. And it's something that we may actually need to plan for.
But have you got the time to do all this? The thing is, that, again, I mean, you're saying the mainstream media is picking up on it and bringing more doom and gloom to a situation that maybe isn't quite as bad as you're pointing out. But, you know, a lot of people are saying the time for talking has now gone. Some tough decisions, some tough action. It's even past time for decisions. It's time for action to happen. Greece has been under heavy fire from EU creditors to adopt these tough austerity measures. The PR hasn't been good. There is a kind of a reputation in Greece that you and your countrymen are just taking the time. There's too much talk. You aren't doing enough. Do you think the pressure is warranted?
I think some of the pressure certainly is warranted. On certain issues like structural reforms, we have been too lax, and many good laws have been passed but not really implemented. On issues like hurrying us up with privatisation, well, it's really a bit futile, because when a sovereign bubble like this pops, valuations are crushed. So it's actually very hard to do anything other than a fire sale. And in terms of austerity, and I don't want to sound like an apologist here, but it hasn't worked in any country. The best way to actually destroy tax revenues is crush consumption. And so you get far less spending. Confidence is at an all-time low, and with no tax revenues, you can't repay your debts. And let's also remember, this second bailout that has been organised is a much better and realistic plan than the first one. At least it partly takes into account issues of solvency and debt reduction, and at least elongates our debt obligations. But remember, this isn't free money. This is all returned plus interest.
Nick, can you get your economics crystal ball out for just 30 seconds and tell us what you think the future of the euro is, with no foreseeable solutions for the crisis on the horizon at the moment, really?
Well, Kevin, I think this focus, especially over this weekend on Greece, is a little bit amiss. I think the biggest problem that the Eurozone faces is its own failure to organise and its own failure to realise that a lot of the underlying problems from the fact that it was never structured properly in the first place. Now, rather than focusing on Greece, which is a very manageable situation, really, when you think about it, it's only 360 billion worth of national debt. Compare that to something like Spain or Italy. Now, these are the elephants in the room. I mean, Italy itself has a national debt of 1.9 trillion. Now, that is too big to bail, not too big to fail, too big
Nick,
to bail.
It's another country, it's another story, and, you know, I could talk all night to you about this, but we're out of time. Nick Skrekas, economic analyst, talking to us from Athens. Real pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much.